Welcome 2026. Germany is losing. The clock is almost gone. Cote d'Ivoire can feel it. They are close, so close. They have held Germany for more than 90 minutes. They are looking at the result, looking at the next round, looking at one of those World Cup stories that people will remember. And then, in the 94th minute, Denis Undav scores. One moment, one finish, one stadium exploding. Germany are alive again. Cote d'Ivoire are standing there trying to understand how everything disappeared in a few seconds. This is why we love football, because football gives us moments that no writer would dare to write. They would be too dramatic, too cruel, too perfect. A team is dead, and then it is alive. A country is crying, and then it is screaming. And then there was Portugal against Croatia. Portugal scored late. Gonzalo Ramos, Croatia are almost out. But Croatia come forward one more time. The ball goes into the box, there is panic. There are bodies everywhere. Nobody is breathing, and Croatia score. For a few seconds, it looks like they have done it. The equalizer, extra time, a country alive again. Then VAR step in. The goal is cancelled. Not for something obvious, not for a brutal fall, not because everyone in the stadium saw handball, but because the technology inside the ball detected the smallest possible touch from Igor Matanovic in the build-up. A touch some people thought might have been his hair. The tiny touch changed the offside phase, and suddenly Croatia were out. Portugal were through, and maybe the most surreal World Cup moment did not even happen on the pitch. It happened somewhere between politics, power, football, and a phone call. The United States had a player sent off, Folarin Balogun, received a red card and was due to miss the next match. Normal football logic would say red card, suspension, player misses next game. But then Donald Trump called Gianni Infantino. The president of the United States personally contacted the FIFA president and asked for the case to be reviewed. And shortly afterwards, FIFA suspended the ban. Balogun was allowed to play. Now, maybe the decision was legally possible. Maybe FIFA had a rule that allowed it. Maybe the red card was too harsh. Maybe the appeal was fair. But just stop 1 second and think about the image. A World Cup player is suspended. The president called the head of FIFA. The decision changes, and suddenly the player is available again for a knockout match. Nothing is surprising anymore. That is exactly why this book feels so relevant right now. Because the fix is not only about the player taking money for a yellow card. It's about power, it's about access, it's about who can call whom. It is about what happens when the people at the top of football are close enough to the people on top of politics that one phone call can become part of the story. Maybe nothing illegal happened, maybe everything followed the rules. But football does not only survive on rules, football survives on trust. And when the fans start believing that the rules work differently depending on who is calling, who is hosting, who is important, or who has the power, then the game has a problem, because then it's no longer only about whether a referee made a mistake. It becomes about whether the whole system can still be trusted. And once you start asking that question, suddenly a late goal, a cancelled goal, a strange yellow card, a referee falling with cramp, or a red card being overturned after a presidential phone call no longer feels like isolated football moments. They start feeling like pieces of much bigger story. Now I want to say this very clearly from the beginning. Germany's late winner is not proof of corruption. Croatia disallowed goal is not proof of corruption. A bizarre football moment is not proof of a fix. Football is chaotic. Football is emotional. Football is cruel. Referees make mistakes. Technology finds detail that human eye cannot see. And sometimes the most ridiculous things is simply the truth. But moments like this create a different question. When one touch, one line, one yellow card, one corner, one referee decision, one offside call can change the fate of an entire nation. How much value is created in that second? How much money is moving around it? And who benefits when the smallest moments in football become measurable, tradable, and beatable? Welcome to Book of Tales. Today we are talking about The Fix, Soccer and Organized Crime by Declan Hill. And this is not an episode about tactics. It's not an episode about whether Germany should have played with who strikers. And it's not an episode about whether Croatia were unlucky. It is not an episode about VAR being good or bad. This is about something much bigger. Can we still believe in spectacle? Because football is not only sports, football is memory. It is your father shouting at the television. It is the first jersey you had as a kid. It is your country playing while you sit in another country in a bar full of strangers and suddenly somebody sees your shirt and says, ah, Romania or Germany or Croatia or Costa Rica. And for 90 minutes, you are not alone. Football is belonging. But what happens when the thing that gives us belonging is also vulnerable to manipulation? What happens when the beautiful game becomes a product? And what happens when that product becomes so valuable that people stop seeing it as sport and start seeing it as inventory? That is the world Declan Hill takes us into. And I have to be honest, it is not a comfortable world. Because after reading this book, you do not only ask, was that match fixed? You ask something worse. How would I even know? There was another moment during this World Cup that stayed with me. USA against Australia. The United States were leading 2-0. The game was tense. Australia were frustrated. There were arguments, fouls, yellow cards, decisions that the Australians felt went against them. The referee was Felix Zweier from Germany. Then late in the stoppage time, he went down with cramp. No collision, no dramatic injury. He simply dropped to the grass. Players from both teams helped stretch his leg. An assistant referee came with a drink. He got up and finished the game. Now, normally, this is just a human moment. Referees run enormous distances. It was hot. The game was intense. People get cramps. Nothing about that moment proves corruption. Nothing. But the internet did what the internet does. People connected the dots because Felix Zweier has a history. In 2005, he receives a 6-month ban connected to the Robert Heuser betting scandal in Germany. He was not found to have intentionally changed the match result, but the case and the punishment became part of his name forever. So suddenly, a cramp was not only a cramp anymore. A yellow card was not only a yellow card. A disputed call was not only a disputed call. Every unusual detail became part of the story, and that is one of the most poisonous effects of corruption. It destroys trust, even when there is no evidence of a new crime. The past contaminates the present. The referee may be honest today. The match may be completely clean, but because football has a history of real corruption, the fan cannot always watch innocently anymore. And I think this is important because I do not want to make an episode where we become conspiracy theorists. I do not want to become the person who says every late goal is fixed, every bad referee is bought, every VAR call is a plot. That is lazy. And it is unfair to thousands of honest players, coaches, referees, and people working inside the game. But pretending the problem does not exist is also lazy because we know it exists. We know football has had real match fixing scandals. We know referees have been bribed, players have been approached. We know betting syndicates have targeted vulnerable leagues and vulnerable people. We know corruption is not fantasy. The question is not whether it exists, the question is how it works. When most people hear match fixing, they imagine a movie. A man walks into a locker room, he puts a suitcase full of money on the table. He says, lose the game. Everybody looks nervous, the team loses. Movie finished. But that is not how sophisticated fixing works. The modern version is much more boring. And because it is boring, it is much more dangerous. Because the moment corruption becomes boring, it becomes repeatable. And when it becomes repeatable, it becomes scalable. And when it becomes scalable, it becomes global. Declan Hill's book is not really about one bad player or one bad referee. It's about an ecosystem, a supply chain. And because I work in a corporate and logistic world, this part is fascinating to me. Because if you remove the football shirts, the stadium lights, the chants, the national anthems, and the emotions, what you see is a global operation. There is demand, there is supply. There are intermediates, there are intermediaries, there are local partners, there is money moving, there is risk management, there is information, there are people looking for weak points. And then there is the final product, not a football match, a betting opportunity. Think about it. Think about it. A match is played in Europe. The betting happens in Asia. The people organizing the money may be someone else. The referee is from another country. The player may be approached through a friend, an agent, a former teammate, a cousin, a club employee, or a person who just happens to know someone. Nobody sees the whole picture. That is the strength of the system. Everyone sees only one part. The player sees a favor, the referee sees a strange message, the coach sees an underperforming player, the fan sees a bad result, the bookmaker sees unusual odds, and the people behind it see the entire operation. That is why Hill's book is so disturbing. He describes fixers not as cartoon villains, but as business people. They travel, they build relationships, they identify vulnerabilities. They ask questions: who has not been paid? Who has gambling debts? Who is unhappy with the coach? Who thinks he deserves more money? Who is lonely? Who has family problems? Who wants a transfer? Who's afraid? Who is already compromised? And this is where the word runner becomes important. A runner is not necessarily the person paying the money. A runner is the person who knows the local environment. He knows who to call. He knows the language. He knows the gossip. He knows which player is angry, which official can open a door, who can be tested. And he does not need to ask immediately for a match to be lost. That would be too obvious, too risky, too stupid. Modern manipulations can be much smaller. One yellow card, one early corner, a penalty, a number of goals, a goal before halftime, a goal after halftime, a player being a little bit late to a tackle, a goalkeeper not trying as hard as he normally would, a defender taking a suspicious risk, a referee adding too much stoppage time, or not enough. This is called spot fixing. And this is one of the reasons why it's so hard to detect, because football is already chaotic. A bad yellow card can be normal bad yellow card. A silly corner can be poor defending. A missed chance can just be a missed chance. A referee mistake can be a referee mistake. Football itself creates the perfect camouflage, and betting markets create the opportunity, because betting is not only about wins. You can bet on goals, corners, cards, penalties, first scorer, correct scores, last scorer, halftime score, the exact minute of a goal, the number of throw-ins. And when the game has hundreds of possible betting markets, it has hundreds of possible pressure points. You do not need to change the result. You only need to change enough of the game for someone to make money. For us, it is a corner. For them, it is a number. For us, it is a yellow card. For them, it is a signal. For us, it is a weird moment. For them, it can be a transaction. There is one scene in the fix that stay with me, because it does not sound like football at all. It sounds like a business meeting. Declan Hill describes sitting near a group of alleged fixers in a KFC restaurant in Bangkok in 2006. It's not in a casino. It's not in a luxury hotel, not in a dark warehouse, a KFC. And the conversation was about trust. A runner connected to a national team claimed that he had players and officials who might be willing to consider throwing a game. But there was a problem. The people founding the operation did not yet trust the team, and the team did not yet trust the people founding the operation. So they needed what Hill calls shopping money. Money paid in advance to build trust. Money to prove that the offer was real. Money to create a relationship. Money to open a door. The amount being discussed was at least $100,000. And that is the moment where the whole thing changes, because this is not one desperate player accepting an envelope. This is a network, a broker, an investor, a runner, potential players, officials, an advance payment, a deal that has to be managed. And the most chilling detail is that they were talking about goalkeepers, not about the whole team collapsing, not about a dramatic 5-0 loss. Goalkeepers, one positions, one person, one vulnerable spot. He later linked the reporting to allegations around Ghana's 2006 World Cup match against Brazil. Ghana's Football Association strongly denied the allegations, rejected Hill's account, and called for investigation. And then the distinctions matter. We cannot turn allegations into facts. We cannot accuse people or teams without proof, but the KFC scene still matters because it shows the architecture. This is how manipulations can be planned, not like fans, not like coaches, not like people who love football, like investors. They are not asking, can we win? They are asking, can we control enough of this product to make money? There is another story that stayed with me. In an episode of Orbitorincii, Costin Știucan tells a story about Steaua from the late 80s, around that golden generation that made Romanian football believe in impossible things. The story is that people connected to the betting world allegedly tried to approach Steaua before a major international final. Now, I want to be careful again. I'm not presenting this as a court decision. I'm not saying we have the full file, all the evidence, all the names, all the proof. But I think the story matters because it changes the way we think about fixing. Most people assume fixers only approach weak teams, poor teams, desperate teams, teams from small leagues, but that is not necessarily true. Big matches create big emotions. Big matches create big money. And where there is big money, there will always be somebody trying to find a way in. The important thing is not whether the approach succeeded. The important thing is that somebody believes it is worth trying. That is already a problem. Because if a team like Steaua can be approached during one of the most legendary moments in Romanian football, then no game is authentically. Then no game is automatically too sacred. No trophy is automatically too important. No match is automatically protected by history. The people trying to manipulate football do not care what match means to you. They care what the match is worth, and that is brutal difference. For us, the game is memory. For them, the game is a market. Now we come to the part that is more difficult than betting markets and syndicates, the human part. Why would somebody agree? Why would a player who has trained his whole life agree to manipulate a match? Why would a referee risk his career? Why would a coach allow something to happen? Why would someone who has already made it still say yes? The answer is usually not one thing. It is rarely just greed. Corruption often starts much smaller. A dinner, a gift, a favor, a person being nice when you are lonely, a person helping you when you have a problem, a person saying, brother, you deserve better, a person saying your club does not care about you, a person saying everybody else is making money except you. Imagine a young player. He's not a superstar. He's not making millions. Maybe he is not even paid for 2 months. Maybe he has a sick parent, he has gambling debts, he is injured and afraid his career is ending. Maybe he is ashamed, he has no one to call, and then someone's entered his life. Not like a gangster in a film. Maybe he's charming, maybe he remembers birthdays. He brings gifts, he buys dinners, he helps with the hotel room. He gives him access to people who seem important. Maybe he says, I believe in you. And little by little, the relationship changes. It is no longer friendship, it becomes leverage. That is grooming, not in a sensational way, in a practical way. You create dependence, secret, a depth, embarrassment, a moment where saying no becomes difficult because once you have accepted something, the other person may have something on you. Maybe it's not even illegal at first. Maybe it's a photo, a receipt, a gambling debt, a private message, a meeting you don't want your club to know about. And suddenly, the person who is helping you is no longer helping you. He owns part of you. This is why the first compromise is the most important one. The first lie, the first small decision, the first time you say, it's not a really big deal. The first time you do something you would not want your child to know about. Because after that, you often need to keep doing it. Otherwise, you have to admit who you became. And this is why people use soft language. Nobody says, I'm betraying my teammates. They say, I'm helping myself. Nobody says, I'm cheating the fans. They say, I am taking an opportunity. Nobody says I'm becoming controlled by criminals. They say I'm solving a problem. And the brain is extremely good at inventing stories that allow us to still feel like good people. I am not fixing the match. I am only taking a yellow card. I'm not making my team lose. I'm only helping with one corner. This is not hurting anyone. Everybody's doing it. The club does not pay me enough. They would replace me tomorrow anyway. This is just business. But no, at some point it stops being business. At some point it becomes betrayal. Why the ZWAYER moments matters. And this is why the Felix ZWAYER moments become so interesting. Again, not because it provokes anything about the USA-Australia match. It doesn't. But because it shows how corruption damages everyone around that game. A referee gets cramp. A normal explanation exists, but people do not see only the moment. They see the history, they see the whole suspension, they see the red cards in the match, they see the Australians complain, they see disputed decision, and then their brain starts connecting dots. Maybe family, maybe fairly, maybe unfairly, maybe completely wrongly. But once trust is damaged, every unusual moment becomes suspicious. This is what match fixing steals. It does not only steal money from bookmakers, it steals trust from fans. It steals trust from honest referees. It steals trust from honest player, from the person watching at home who wants to enjoy the game without becoming an investigator. And that is tragic because sport works only when we believe the result matters. Not only the score, the effort, the suffering, missed penalties, the last minute goal, the miracle. If we stop believing that the people on the field are trying honestly, then the entire emotional contract breaks. And maybe that is why the fix feels so uncomfortable, because it does not only ask, can a game be manipulated? It asks, what happens to us when we can no longer tell? Now, I want to turn the microphone towards us, the fans, because we know FIFA has had corruption scandals. We know football has had real match fixing scandals. We know betting has changed the economics of sports. We know lower leagues are often more vulnerable. We know players who are not paid are easier to pressure. We know referees and athletes can be approached. We know integrity system exists because the danger is real. So why do we keep watching? Why do we still care so much? Why do we still scream at the television like our lives depend on it? And I don't want to ask this in a cynical way. I understand it. I love football. I watch almost every single game from this World Cup. Football gives us something that very few things give us. A World Cup is not only a tournament, it is an excuse to call your father. It is an excuse to invite friends over, to wear the shirt of a country you may have left years ago. It is an excuse to feel connected to people you have never met. For expats, football can be even more emotional. You live somewhere else. You may speak another language every day. You may build a new life. But then your country plays, and suddenly that old feeling comes back. The anthem, the flag, the players you remember, the people from home sending messages, and you remember that even if you live somewhere else, part of you is still connected. Football creates a tribal belonging. And I do not mean tribal in a bad way. I mean in the oldest human way. We need rituals, symbols, stories, moments where we are allowed to feel something together. The World Cup gives us this. The World Cup gives us that. It gives us heroes, villains, comebacks, tragedies, redemption. It gives us drama in a world where most of our lives are not dramatic enough to feel like stories. And maybe that is why we forgive football. Maybe that is why we look away, because we need the spectacle. We need the 94th minutes winner. We need the impossible comeback, the goalkeeper who saves 4 penalties. We need the underdog. We need the giant to fall. And we need something that cannot be explained by a spreadsheet. And maybe that is why knowing about corruption hurts so much, because it threatens something we love. It threatens a place where we go to feel. But maybe the answer is not to stop loving football. Maybe the answer is to love it enough to demand better from it, to protect players, to protect referees, to protect young athletes, to make sure clubs pay people properly, to make sure suspicious approaches can be reported safely, to make sure people who say no are protected, to make sure betting markets are monitored. Football institutions do not only talk about integrity after a scandal explodes, because the opposite of corruption is not innocence. The opposite of corruption is accountability. And accountability is not romantic. It is paperwork. It is monitoring. It is education. It is independent investigation. It is people being able to say no, system that can make corruption harder than honesty. That is what we should want. Not a perfect sport. There is no perfect sport. There are no perfect humans. But a sport where the people who want to manipulate it have fewer places to hide. So next time when you watch the World Cup, watch it with joy. Please do. Celebrate the goals. Get angry at the referees. Argue with your friends. Wear that shirt. Enjoy the madness. But maybe keep one question somewhere in the back of your mind. Not as paranoia, not as conspiracy theory, not as the person who thinks every strange result is fixed, not as a flat earther, just as awareness. What are we really watching? A game? A business? A global entertainment product? A betting market? A national ritual? A family memory? Maybe it is all of those things at the same time, and maybe that is why it is so vulnerable, because football means too much to too many people. Declan Hill's The Fix is not a book that tells you to stop watching football. At least this is not what I took from it. It is a book that asks you to stop watching blindly. And I think that is fair because the game deserves better. The players deserve better. The honest referees deserve better. And the fans deserve even better. And next time a 94-minute goal changes the story of a World Cup match, maybe we can hold two thoughts at the same time. One, this is why football is beautiful. And two, beauty is worth protecting. Thank you for listening to Book of Tales. If you want to go deeper into this story, the book is called The Fix, Soccer and Organized Crime by Declan Hill. You can find it through the book club link in the description. And I would generally love to know your answer. Can you still enjoy football when you know how vulnerable it is? Or maybe knowing the truth make you love it even more? See you in the next episode.